Hi everyone. I think we have a big group here to do supervision for the spring semester, and we have Amber, me, Jelaine, who did it last time, Lakendra, Jovita, and Amy Carver. And so all of you are going to be supervising teaching experience 2. So it's the second experience. Many of you are going to be with the same students. There are a couple who will have new students to supervise, and I'll introduce you to them. We're in TE2, so this is the teaching experience folder, 1819, and we're going to TE2. TE2 is organized around 3 projects or activities for the students. Now, much of the work that they do is independent, so they're reading things and they're kind of looking at models, and then they have to do just a pretty small activity that is related. So the first is really focused on the expanded core curriculum for deaf and hard of hearing. They have to do 2 checklists or observations and assessments using checklists. And you'll see these on Google. But, and then they have to, from their observations, they identify 2 goals with a benchmark for each of the goals. So that is due on February 22nd. The second project is an IEP project. And so they pick a student from where they're working, and they do some reading about eligibility criteria, and then they literally fill out some of the forms that are part of the IEP process for determining eligibility for special education. Now, the forms that are here, that we're using here, are the DPI forms. But they can also use the forms, and many really already have used the forms for their school or district. So that's the second project. The third is really focused on formal assessment, and they select an assessment, and you maybe will have some ideas for them. And they do the assessment with their student, and then they write, it's a short report about the results of their assessment. So each of these projects, 222, 32, and 419. So they post a video on the project on February 22nd, and then you have about a week. I have dates down, but about a week to give feedback, and then March 2nd, and then April 19th. So kind of 3 big activities. Each of these projects has multiple things that students are to read and to use as part of the project. So there's an overview, Teaching Experience Project 1, and this really explains what they have to post to their teaching journal, and then it walks them through. These are the checklists that they can select from. And then they look at expanded core curriculum. You're probably familiar with these. And then they use the curriculum to create goals and benchmarks for one student. That's what they post then to their teaching journal. And then here's the overview for them. That looks like the other overview. And then these are the evaluation competencies that are being addressed by this project. And that's project 1. And here, these are here's a sample for project 1. Should say 1. And you see the checklists that they can, the life, self-advocacy teacher checklists. I don't know why they're in both forms, PDF and Word document, and then some ideas or some tips for observation, kind of how to. And so that's project 1. Project 2, again, there's an overview, and it tells them exactly what they have to do. So they have to do like the IEP report, and really they're the forms that they fill out to see if they just need an experience to complete those forms. And then they also have a video, and that is, again, some reading, some examples of IEPs, and then this is their project. They identify a focus student, and they complete this checklist. They complete the special factors, and then they write one academic goal with 2 benchmarks. So they're very short projects, but they're kind of focused on a particular skill. All right. Then we go back to, these are some IEP examples. All right. Now let's go back to project 3, and this is January, February, March, April. They have to do 2 things. They first have to go out and they have to talk with the people that they work with, and they have to ask what are some of the assessment tools that they use with DHH students. And so it might be the cooperating teacher, it might be another DHH teacher, but they make a list of, and they add all of the tools that they really need to know in their setting. Then they actually pick one assessment, more formal assessment, and they administer it to their student. And then they write a short report on the results. So again, there's an overview, what they have to post. It includes a video. And then here's the overview again. And if you look at the dates, they post it by one date, one time, and then they can expect feedback by this second date, 4/1. So 4/19 is when they post, and 4/20 5-1. It's a good thing I'm reading this because I had to edit as I go. 5-1, they are expecting the feedback. And then here it does give the dates for the final evaluation. They do their self-assessment, and then they email it to you, and you do the assessment, and then you talk. You have a conference. You can use Zoom again, or it's face-to-face, or you find ways to have coffee, you know. Okay, so that's what the teaching experience projects are. The for each of the projects, they also post a video. And so your job as a supervisor is to watch the video, give them feedback using the forms that we did last semester. Same forms. So you have one for face-to-face if you do an observation, you know, in the setting. And the other is for the distance video when the student actually initiates that form. They watch their own video and then they fill it out and they email it to you. You watch the video and then you give them feedback. So it's really the same process we used last semester. And then so each project has something that the student has submitted. Again, very short to give them feedback on, and then the video. And so there are 3 projects. I think that's most of it. Now, I am really happy to meet with any of you, either on the Zoom, like this, or I will drive and I will find you and we can meet. We will probably, I have a meeting with students on the 19th, so that's this Saturday, and then classes start on the 20th, and then, but their first assignment is not due until February 22nd. So we have a little bit of time for you to make contact and kind of get schedules and then get started. Okay, well, I will probably be talking with you.